America's finest caught in the crossfire of a political war over funding. This is Special Report. Good evening, I'm Brett Baer. We're about halfway between the start of the partial government shutdown and the day the U.S. faces what the administration calls the line in the sand for Congress to raise the debt ceiling, the point at which the Treasury Secretary says he will have no more options and the country could face default. In the midst of a polarizing partisan disagreement about almost everything, there is one situation that all agree must be addressed, involving families of fallen military personnel. We have Fox team coverage. Britt Hume is here in the Bureau with analysis of the shutdown situation. Ed Henry is at the White House updating what the president and his people are doing. But we begin with national security correspondent Jennifer Griffin at the Pentagon and a public relations nightmare over military death benefits. Good evening, Jennifer.
Good evening, Brett. After 2 days of political sniping and public outcry, the Congress, White House and Pentagon scrambled to come up with a solution to make things right.
They paid the ultimate sacrifice for the nation, and then their families were paid the ultimate insult, denied the $100,000 in death benefits and paid travel to Dover Air Force Base to meet their next of kin due to the partial government shutdown. Sergeant Joseph Peters, First Lieutenant Jennifer Marino, Sergeant Patrick Hawkins, and Private First Class Cody Patterson returned home today from Afghanistan. Friends of Sergeant Peters, who left behind a wife and 20-month-old son, expressed concern.
Seeing people lose their lives, people losing their sons and daughters, their husbands, their wives, they have family waiting that need help.
On the eve of the shutdown, the president signed the Pay Our Military Families Act. Congressional Republicans thought that law gave the Pentagon the authority it needed to pay death benefits.
Frankly, I think it's disgraceful that they're withholding these benefits.
I guess somebody in the Justice Department or the Pentagon had some problems interpreting what we said.
The White House woke up to the problem today, ordering the Pentagon and its lawyers to fix it.
The president was very disturbed to learn of this problem. The president expects this to be fixed today.
Begging the question, why wasn't it fixed sooner? The Pentagon warned Congress, the public, and presumably the White House 3 days before the shutdown.
We would also be required to do some other bad things to our people. Just some examples: we couldn't immediately pay death gratuities to those who die on active duty during the lapse.
Today, Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel accepted a solution offered by the private charity Fisher House, which agreed to step in and pay the families until the shutdown ends.
We're going to bridge the gap until sanity rules down in Washington and the president and Congress get in a room and straighten this out.
At Dover, all four families made it in time to meet the coffins, greeted by Secretary Hagel, his first visit to Dover since taking the job in February. On the Senate floor, the chaplain provided a prayer.
Lord, when our federal shutdown delays payments of death benefits to the families of children dying on faraway battlefields, it's time for our lawmakers to say enough is enough.
In the end, the Pentagon, which has the largest budget in the federal government, decided the solution was to let the private sector pay. Brett?
Jennifer Griffin live at the Pentagon. Jennifer, thank you. President Obama will once again welcome Republican lawmakers to the White House tomorrow. It appears earlier sessions have involved a lot more take than give on the president's part. Chief White House correspondent Ed Henry looks at the lay of the land this time around.
As President Obama unveiled Janet Yellen as his nominee to lead the Federal Reserve, he tried to send the markets a signal of stability.
Sound monetary policy to make sure that we keep inflation in check, but also increasing employment and creating jobs.
Even as the president's aides seem to agree with an assessment today by J.P. Morgan's chief economist that if the nation goes into default, there will be a recession.
One of those consequences could be recession.
Speaker John Boehner continues to dig in on demanding changes to the president's health care law amid mounting glitches to a botched rollout.
What a train wreck. How can we tax people for not buying a product from a website that doesn't work?
The latest AP GFK poll suggests both men have a weak hand in this face-off. The survey found 53% disapprove of the way the president is handling his job, while 37% approve. As for who holds almost all or a lot of the responsibility for the government shutdown, Republicans get blamed by more voters, but no party or leader is exempt. 62% say Republicans in Congress get almost all or a lot of the blame. 49% say the president. 49% say Democrats in Congress. 48% say Boehner. 43% say the Tea Party. 39% say Senate Democratic leader Harry Reid.
We're happy to work with our Republican colleagues, open the government, pay our bills. We'll negotiate anything.
Yet Reid and the White House were delivered a blow when Joe Manchin became the first Senate Democrat to break with the president's insistence to not negotiate over a potential default. Manchin telling reporters, quote, "People may be talking about no negotiation. You've got to negotiate. That's what we're here to do." The president scheduled a series of outreach meetings, starting late today with the entire House Democratic caucus, and made plans to meet Thursday with the entire House Republican conference, even as his press secretary continued to bash Republicans.
After Republicans agreed to leave the matches and the gasoline outside of the room and sit down and negotiate.
Boehner blasted the president's move to bring Republicans in at the 11th hour. In the meantime, the House has now passed 14 mini spending bills to fund portions of the government. Senate Democrats have rejected the piecemeal approach each time.
Grow up, Senate. You can't do this one agency at a time.
Speaker Boehner has now said he's not going to bring the entire House Republican conference over because it's too little, too late. Instead, he's going to bring over tomorrow a small team of negotiators to try to start working out a deal with the president. Jay Carney blasted that, said it was a mistake not to send all Republicans. Brett?
And Ed, House Democrats just leaving the White House moments ago behind you said they're happy with the president's stance. No surprise there.
There's been a lot of unity with House Democrats, and the White House is trying to highlight that tonight. We'll see how much unity there is tomorrow.
Okay. Ed Henry live on the North Lawn. Ed, thanks. Let's get some thoughts now on this standoff from senior political analyst Brit Hume. Good evening, Brit.
Hi, Brett. Polling on the shutdown shows the Republicans getting most of the blame, as you've heard, but the numbers are not nearly as bad for the GOP as they were during shutdowns back in 1995 and 96. A Fox News poll, for example, showed more people blamed the Republicans and the Tea Party over the president and the Democrats by about 10 points. But that's less than half the margin of 18 years ago. And the president himself got virtually the same share of blame as House Speaker John Boehner in that poll. This is remarkable considering how it started. Republicans demanded the complete defunding of Obamacare as the price for keeping the government funded. It was a pie-in-the-sky scheme with no chance of becoming law, and the polls showed the public strongly disapproved. Predictably, it failed, and the shutdown began. But the next thing you saw was TV images of aging military veterans breaching obviously unnecessary shutdown barricades around the open-air World War II memorial. Then the House began passing bills, as you've heard, to reopen key parts of the government, no strings attached. The Senate blocked them, and the White House promised vetoes anyway. So now who was keeping the government closed? Then the Speaker of the House asked for negotiations. The White House balked for days, despite polls showing strong support for talks. Now, the GOP is still in a tight spot, but the clumsy behavior of the president and his party has nearly let them out of it. Brett?
Brett, there will be conservatives who say what you just talked about there is what Ted Cruz, the senator from Texas, predicted on day one.
Well, he also was the architect, however, of the strategy to use the prospect of a government shutdown as a point of leverage for defunding Obamacare. Obviously, that didn't work. So the question now for Republicans is how can they come out of this with something?
What's the best hope?
Well, one thing I think we can say for sure is that it doesn't appear that they're going to have the kind of game-changing event here that will so discredit them in the public's eyes compared to the Democrats that they would be in trouble for 2014. That's point number one. The second thing is they need to find some ground on which they can, maybe budgetary, maybe to do with future entitlement spending and so forth, that it would allow them to escape with something to show for this. The government reopens, and perhaps the debt ceiling gets raised. If the president refuses to give them that, I think they're as united as the Democrats are. You notice that those Republicans invited to the White House for tomorrow, when the Speaker said he didn't want to send them all, they stuck with him. They're fine with the group that he's sending over. So we now have two remarkably united parties in the middle of this impasse.
Remarkable. Britt, thanks.
You bet.
Up next, is Obamacare plus the IRS a disaster waiting to happen? Plus, First, we're going to give you a look at what some of our Fox affiliates across the country are covering tonight. WTRF in West Virginia with shots fired near the federal building there in Wheeling. The gunman is said to be dead tonight. Fox 2 in Detroit with Michigan's governor testifying under oath about his decision to put the Motor City in bankruptcy court. And this is a live look at Chicago from WFLD. The big story there tonight, the release of surveillance tape in a police brutality case in Skokie. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back.